Hello and Monday, 1st March. It's a beginning of a new month and for us, a beginning of a new journey. I'm Nitin Gokhale, editor in chief of StratNews Global, and I'm kicking off a new program from today, which will be run every evening at 7 p.m. India Standard Time, Monday to Wednesday. And it's going to be called The Gist. So today, and the inaugural edition of The Gist is about India's attempts to broker or get peace on two fronts, China and Pakistan, after a almost a year long standoff with China, and of course, 5 year long uh, period of ignoring Pakistan for its involvement in terrorism in Kashmir and its proxy war in Jammu and Kashmir. So we are asking this question on this evening's program: India's two-front peace. What next for ties with China and Pakistan? What is India going to do in the coming months and coming weeks? Is it going to talk peace? Is it going to upgrade ties with Pakistan? Is China going to play ball? All that will be answered in a moment's time. But let's look at what India has done in the past 2 weeks. First, with China disengaging at crucial border points and where they were face to face, the armies of the two countries. That happened about 2 weeks ago. And of course, the surprise announcement on 25th of February, where we talked about the Pakistan peace initiative. But let's talk about initially the LAC disengagement. If you look back 2 weeks ago, India and China, after 10 rounds of core commander level talks, started the disengagement process, completed it within a month, the first phase at least. And all these points were agreed to, which were followed up and implemented, where patrolling in that Finger 4 and Finger 8 area will be resumed only after discussions take place between the diplomats and higher leadership. Status quo ante has been restored on both north and the south bank of Pangong Lake. And the Chinese have gone east of Finger 8, as we know. And India will remain, or Indian troops will remain at the Dhan Singh Thapa post near Finger 3. That's some of the crucial points in that agreement or the disengagement process. And of course, with the discussions, it was also decided that all the structures built on both sides will be demolished, and status quo ante as it existed in April 2020 will be restored. So core commanders have held the 10th round of talks already. They are now discussing the other friction points like Gogra, Hot Springs, Depsang, and of course the future protocols that need to be followed, because all other earlier agreements seem to have been completely destroyed by Chinese attitude in what the Chinese did since May 2020. Coming to Pakistan itself, the DGMOs, the Director Generals of Military Operations on both sides, issued a joint statement and decided that both sides would review the situation along the line of control and other sectors, that is the international border. The agreement, of course, addressed the core concerns that were disturbing peace, where civilians being targeted, civilians being killed. And the agreement, as all of you know by now, came into force on the midnight of 25th February. Both sides have, of course, now decided to use the hotlines more often. There will be flag meetings, and whatever misunderstandings are there at the local level will be sorted out at the local level, is what the understanding is. Of course, this has not come overnight, as all of you know. There were back channel talks going on between the NSAs of both sides and at other levels, which finally resulted in this agreement. How long will it hold? How long will it continue to bring peace on the Pakistan-India border? Remains to be seen. But at the moment, let's look at the prospects of peace, at least absence of violence, if nothing else, on both the fronts. And instead of a two-front war, India is now looking at a two-front peace. That's the subject that we are discussing today. And joining me from Zurich is Prem Mahadevan, lead analyst of the Indo-Swiss Future Leaders Forum. Welcome, Prem. Thank you for joining us. Your first appearance on our channel, but great to have you here, and something that we look forward to, given your background and your analysis. So, first question to you, Prem. What do you think of the agreement between the two DGMOs? It hasn't come overnight. It has come with some understanding at a higher level. What is your first thought on that when you heard that?
Thank you for very much for inviting me, sir. It's always a pleasure to watch your channel and you bring out fantastic analysis. So really, it's a privilege to participate. To answer your question, I when I first heard this, I was not very surprised. Actually, the Pakistanis have for quite some time uh, been trying to bring about a reduction of hostilities. I don't see this as any great step or magnanimity or or a visionary step on their part. I see this as a very calculating move. At this particular juncture, they want to impress the Biden administration by appearing reasonable. I think during the Trump administration, they knew they were write offs, more or less, internationally. But they're hoping to turn over a new leaf with the Biden administration. So, this overture from them is first a political signal. Then it also aims to give them some respite militarily. Um, and they also think at this particular juncture, when India is facing tensions with China, that they can spin this as if, India desperately wants to have peace with us. So, within a matter of time, I would just give it a few days. Actually, they're going to start making it out like the Indians came to us, wanting to make peace. Actually, we sort of carved them down. That's what I think is basically behind it.
That's been their record in any case. I mean, you've written and analyzed and researched on Pakistan quite extensively in your avatar as an analyst. You've been in Zurich now for over a decade, and before that in London. The question that is uppermost in everybody's mind has been this: that if India had ignored Pakistan for almost 5 years now and had rejected every attempt to come and talk, the Pakistani attempt to come and talk with India. Why suddenly this, which you have answered partly? And I won't be surprised, like you, that if they start saying that it is the Chinese pressure or the pressure on the second front that India has been forced to then now talk to us. But just looking a little ahead of us in the coming summer, what would be India's red lines in continuing or sort of stopping this ceasefire, or let's say breaking this ceasefire, or not adhering to the terms? Because after all, India has also said that it reserves the right to continue the anti-terror operations, anti-infiltration operations on the line of control. So, what would be your prognosis?
Well, first of all, India is actually just being perfectly reasonable when it continues anti-terror operations on its own turf, and there's no way the Pakistanis could do anything about it. So I would even suggest there's almost no need to have mentioned that, but we want to sort of be very clear and explicit. Fine. I think in terms of red lines, certainly one could say that all right, if there is a major terror attack on India in the Indian part of Kashmir, that is the part which is currently with us. Not, I mean, because Pakistan occupied Kashmir is also Indian territory. Let's be clear about that. But for definitional purposes, we have to say our
Sure.
side of the line of control. So
Right.
if there is a major attack there, then of course that is one thing. I would suspect that another thing could be that if there is, say, a major border action by the Pakistanis, or even a relatively minor one, that could be another red line. I don't think, however, that it is quite the Pakistani game plan is that tactical. I think they're being a little bit more strategic in this. I've read some analysis in the last few days saying that, oh, this is all because of the FATF and they just want to look good. I agree that the FATF pressure is part of it for sure. But I think there's also another game plan here. I really think their focus is now more on creating conditions for destabilization elsewhere in India. And
Hmm.
this is something that they have done consistently for the last 35 years. Basically,
Right.
ever since they started interfering in Punjab, they would always follow this idea of, you know, we talk peace and we do terror. And we do terror using Indian proxies. So it was initially the Khalistanis, then it became our worthy Dawood Ibrahim, of course, who's an honored guest now in Pakistan. Then it became, of course, the other distinguished guests of Pakistan, such as the Indian Mujahideen, all these the Bhatkal brothers and everyone, all based out of there.
Sure.
So I think what they're trying to do is create actually strategic space, a narrative space for a campaign of terror within the Indian hinterland. And for that reason, it is not even in their interest right now to escalate tensions along the LOC. And I'll explain why very straightforwardly. The LOC
Sure.
is one area where if they do something in India, straight away we can retaliate. Bullet for bullet, goalie for goalie. They know it. So their idea is that let's do something elsewhere in India, and then if there is a ceasefire along the LOC, it's like a political hostage which we can hold. We can tell the world, we can tell India that you can't retaliate, otherwise we'll abrogate the ceasefire. So I think they're trying to give themselves political leverage. For that reason, they probably want the ceasefire to remain in place for a little while.
I'm sure, and it's a great point you make about the Pakistanis trying to create space for themselves and a strategic angle to this whole move. But I'm clearly also I'm also clear really that the Indian interlocutors, Indian decision makers are also aware of this possibility or this danger of the Pakistanis trying to repeat the playbook of the 80s and the 90s, where they played havoc in Punjab first, and then of course used the Indian Mujahideen in other parts of the country between in the first decade of this century. That said, the Indian calculation would perhaps be that let's sort of give peace a chance, so that at least the LOC is not heated up, whereas we retain the right to retaliate as Indian Army and Indian government has said. But going forward, what would be their game plan vis-a-vis China or with China? Do you think they also would act in concert with China on some other fronts?
My understanding is they would certainly fantasize about it. They would dream about acting in concert with China. About the Chinese factor, just to sort of touch upon this, I think one reason why it would also make sense for us, India, to have accepted this particular overture from Pakistan, and it's important to record who approached whom because that story
Right.
will change over time. But one reason why it serves our interest is because what the slight pullback on the Chinese side is easily reversible by China at any time.
Right.
They can
Yes.
pretty much, they can pretty much escalate tensions once again if they want. Everyone knows it. So I think the understanding is that we simply cannot take for granted that it was Pakistan that's the loose cannon, that we had to keep all of the majority of our focus there, and that China was a stable, an actor which would only slightly provoke us but never escalate too dramatically. That calculus has changed now after
Completely.
Galwan. Now we recognize that there is a serious problem with China. So we need to adjust our force deployments. And it makes sense as we are looking at moving troops from one front to the other. It makes sense that if the Pakistanis want, even if it's for a few weeks, if they want to have a reduction in hostilities, it serves India's interests. So I agree with you completely, sir, that the Indian establishment, which consists of some very distinguished senior officials who've served in Punjab fighting Khalistani terrorism, um, they know the Pakistani motives thoroughly. But that still doesn't mean that we should ignore that it serves our interests as of now to switch focus momentarily to shoring up our defenses against China.
Absolutely. I mean, that's something that they would have factored in, I'm sure. But just moving focus or shifting focus a little bit on the Chinese front, and I'm hoping that our other guest, we had planned to get Atul Aneja. There he is. Welcome, Atul. Thanks for joining. We were just wondering, you got busy in your editorial responsibilities. But I was just speaking to Prem about the two-front war that looked imminent, or two-front trouble that looked imminent some months ago, now seems to be a little bit turning towards two-front peace for a while. But I was talking to him about the LOC and the surprise move, rather surprise move for most of us, about the ceasefire again being attempted on the LOC and the international border with Pakistan. But as someone who has watched China from within China by staying and reporting from China, why do you think the disengagement on the line of actual control has panned out? How it has panned out, and what do you see going forward as far as India-China relations are concerned? Atul?
Nitin, regarding India-China, I think it's very important that what happened in the last 1 year or so can happen again. And it's a trust but verify kind of situation with China because of ideological reasons, because of the competition between two rising civilizational powers. The Chinese mentality, I still think, is that of the Middle Kingdom essentially, which is that its inability to accept other countries as equals. And that we have seen earlier in a historical context. We see what happened with the Soviet Union at one time. We saw in the Korean War with the Americans. So the Chinese ability to accept others as equals is a problem. And India is the main holdout because it has got rival and equal potential to become another major power. So I don't think the Chinese mentalities will change, especially against the present dispensation of Xi Jinping. So why did the Chinese move away? I think it was primarily because of the August 29 action of the special the group which occupied the height in the south bank of the Pangong Lake. I think that gave us the equalizer, and rest was the negotiations which took place. We could, after that event, talk from a position of some strength, and that is what works with the Chinese. So long as we have the capacity to demonstrate a reasonable amount of deterrent power, I think we may have a situation where Chinese do not intrude with impunity as they have been doing in the past. And I think over here, the relationship between India, Japan, the Quad countries is going to be crucial. Because I think if the Chinese are going to be persuaded, they may not be persuaded on the mountains, but really in the Indo-Pacific zone. And here, I mean, the capacity of India, along with that of the Japanese, Americans, and Australia, to have real capacity, especially in the Andaman Sea, in the 10-degree and 6-degree channel, to have a capacity to deter or to impact on Chinese shipping, the commercial shipping. So I think really you have to see the composite picture. And if you have to deter the Chinese against such kind of intrusions, I think we got to move very strongly on the maritime front. If we do that, I think we're in business and may have the capacity to persuade China purely from position of power and strength, not to make a move like that, which they did in the Ladakh and elsewhere as well along the LAC.
That's true. In fact, that's well put. But I think it may be a temporary truce, temporary withdrawal. And as you rightly said, and as I've been saying after visiting Ladakh and also reporting from there, that the Chinese have just gone back maybe 100 kilometers and they can come equally fast as they have gone back. So that one should not forget. And I think Indian decision makers are well aware of it. Maybe this is a good temporary respite. But linking the Chinese withdrawal or a Chinese disengagement, let's say, remember there's no de-escalation as yet or de-induction of the troops. So Chinese disengagement with India and Indian troops on the LAC, as some commentators have attempted, that it is because China put pressure and because China was putting pressure on the LAC that India is now forced to look at Pakistan also and concede to Pakistan's demand of a ceasefire being implemented seriously. What would you say to that as someone who's also watched and reported and stayed in the Gulf?
Look, Nitin. I think what happened with Pakistan hasn't happened. It is all of a sudden. There has been a long back channel contacts which resulted in this. But I think we need to broaden the picture with Pakistan now. We didn't have too much of leverage against them, but let us look at the scenario, what is happening internally in Pakistan. I'm not saying we have a hand in it, but it is something, a situation which has gone to India's advantage. You see what's happening in Gilgit-Baltistan in terms of the firmament which is taking place over there. You see what's happening in Balochistan. I think the Pakistanis would be very keen, because if you are if you look from a Pakistani perspective, historically you had a Bangladesh, and if the movement in Balochistan gathers momentum, and that's a place from which your China-Pakistan economic corridor is passing, it really means a scenario where you probably will be left with only Punjab and Sindh. So I think Pakistani nationalists would realize that it is not in their interest that such a situation has happened. What has really happened with India Pakistan is that we were earlier fighting only on the Kashmir front, that is inside Indian territory. But what's now happened is that there are territories within Pakistan which stand exposed. And I think if you are looking from a Pakistani perspective, it makes sense to sort of have a situation of near normality with India. And then again is the Indian sort of approach, so your surgical strike, your capacity to do a Balakot. I think and Balakot means you're going beyond Kashmir into Pakistani mainland. So I think that it has all gone into the Pakistani thinking that it is not in their interest and their capacity to do a two-front war. After all, if you recall, Nitin, when we had Abhinandan being taken prisoner, there were clear threats of a missile attack on Pakistan. So Pakistan knows that if it crosses a line in terms of a two-front bondage, it's going to get it back from India, because India has moved. There will still be asymmetry when you have China and Pakistan together. But there is a deterrence which is coming in India, and the capacity to demonstrate. I think this is a crucial change which has taken place. And the Pakistanis have done us no favor. I think it is in their own interest now to watch out their backyard that they have come to terms with this LOC agreement. I'm not sure, Nitin, whether the Chinese and the Pakistanis here really work together. Because if you see the Chinese response, reaction, there was one statement saying that if Pakistan had a debt problem, it is not because of CPEC, but something else. So you see the dissonance coming here. I was a little surprised, which probably indicates that what happened at the LOC was not done between Pakistan and China in consultation, but probably something which Pakistani nationalists woke up to on their own. I mean, just a thought.
No, you're right. Absolutely. In fact, it's in Pakistan's interest, given the situation they are in and the kind of capacity that India demonstrated. In fact, the announcement came on the eve of the second anniversary of the Balakot strike. And Prem, coming back to you, how much of the effect it would have had, the Balakot strike or even the earlier Uri surgical strike, on the Pakistani military psyche or the Pakistani decision makers' ability to now contend with an India which was willing to take risk and which is willing to implement some of these threats which used to be issued earlier, that we will retaliate with our place and time of our choosing. All that, I think, having demonstrated that, would that have played on the minds of the Pakistani decision makers? Prem?
Yes, sir. I think it certainly would have played on their minds, because, you see, whatever spin they give, and let's remember with Pakistan, this society became a post-truth society when the rest of the world still believed in sanity and the existence of facts. Pakistan lived in an alternate reality for quite some time. Even in the mid-1980s, they had school textbooks saying that we won the 1971 war, which were, by the way, ridiculed by Pakistani scholars, saying that if we won the 1971 war, why did we lose Bangladesh? So
Exactly.
let's not lose sight of Pakistan's capacity to modify narratives along the way,
Or
without
delude
any
itself.
respect for logic.
Or
Right?
delude itself, yes.
Delude itself, exactly. Let's remember that, they were never in Kargil. All right. And when we captured Tiger Hill, they denied that there was a place called Tiger Hill. All these little footnotes of history should be remembered, for
Sure.
our own amusement, if nothing else. So I think, whatever they may feed themselves about the Balakot and, their counter-strike and all, the message that came through from Balakot is, if India can strike our territory, and this is not, mean, POK is not their territory anyway, but let's assume that they think of it as theirs. If India can strike Pakistan proper and suffer no international consequence, there was no international condemnation of India. That is something which I think shook them up, and they have quietly focused the narrative completely on their airstrike subsequently because they don't want to acknowledge the diplomatic defeat, which
Right.
actually was the real message of Balakot, that you expected after something like 2611, you expected correctly that the international community would restrain India. Now, the thing is that after something like Uri, which happens in J&K, you think that you will get a point for good behavior. That all right, you didn't do another Mumbai Shabash, that shows what you reasonable people you are. No, we come and hit you in POK. There's nothing you can do about it. So you just try to save face and say nothing happened. Then you do
Exactly.
a Pulwama, and you want to make it look like, yeah, now we hit them, on their turf. So in such a huge way, then we come and hit you properly in your turf. And again, the international community just does nothing because now they've seen what you are. You see, just very quickly, I want to make a point. I think in all this, we're forgetting the fact that Pakistan's international image has been getting steadily trashed over the last decade. It has been a slow process, but it's been happening. And it's happening because now Pakistan is clearly seen as a Chinese proxy, whereas previously, prior to Abbottabad, they were still seen as something of a swing state. In fact, one reason they're trying to bring this ceasefire in is now is to regain some respectability that we are not only a Chinese puppet. So that is one factor because they realize that they kind of lose Europe, they lose the United States, North America, the free world when they become clearly a Chinese marionette. So there's that element as well.
Absolutely. So, one final thoughts from both of you, but first to Atul, that while we talk about this sudden change in the temperature, if I can call it that, on the borders, from a standoff that lasted for more than 9 months on the line of actual control, and a very violent and very, I would say, aggressive behavior on the line of control with Pakistan. Now we have at least a official prospect of two front peace. What would you venture out to say that this will last for some time, or do you think, as analysts and commentators and journalists, we should be skeptical about it? Atul?
Yeah, Nitin, it's very important here that we actually start a dialogue with the Chinese. It's very important to keep the track open. And frankly, when I was investigating this entire thing about the road DSDBO and our access to the Karakoram Pass, I thought at some point, we should keep the dialogue open. And can we think of a new economic corridor extending through Karakoram Pass towards Kashgar? I mean, it's not happening now, and we need to keep the powder dry, but keep the dialogue open on that. And at some point, if there is a change in the Chinese behavior, which can come because of the internal pressures which Xi Jinping is facing within the Communist Party of China, I think,
Atul,
yep,
can you? Yeah,
yeah.
exactly. Sorry.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
So, what I was saying was that if you can, you never know what's happening inside China. It happens quite suddenly. And there is this Communist Youth League people, including Prime Minister Li Keqiang, which is waiting in the wings in a way. So keep the dialogue with the Chinese open. And at some point of time, if there is a change, which I doubt very much, why not propose this at some point as a new economic corridor to Kashgar from here, and and see where it takes us.
It's a different point of view, certainly. But Prem, one final thought from you on the Pakistani front, at least, that now that we have sort of responded to the Pakistani overture and initiative, uh, what should be Indian steps? Trust but verify, or be on your guard? What would you think?
When it comes to Pakistan, be on your guard is a given. There is no question about that. Let's not forget what a gift they gave us on 2611.
Sure.
And let's not forget that shortly before that, Zardari had said, there's a little bit of Pakistani in every Indian, a bit of Indian in every Pakistani, and also those efforts to manipulate the atmospherics will be there from their side. In fact, what I anticipate now is they are going to make a huge push through various propaganda forums, including cyber trolls, but also through journalists, the international community. They'll organize conferences and all to make it out that peace is but a short step away. It's only that India needs to make the effort. They'll conveniently forget mentioning Jamaat-ul Dawa, 2611, all that will be forgotten. So
True.
we should anticipate blackmail from them at the diplomatic and discourse level. And I think we should be very clear that we're not even going to condescend to respond to them. We should expose them for the human rights violations which they are doing in Baluchistan, suppression of Pashtun rights, because now as they are fencing the Durand line, there's going to be more resentment on that. That is not and that is another reason I suspect why this pressure for the ceasefire is there from their side. So we should continue with all that. And as far as the ceasefire is concerned, okay, troops on both sides can rest easy a bit for now, but there's nothing further beyond that. In terms of next steps, there is no pressure on India to take next steps because India is not the one sponsoring terror.
Absolutely. So I think that is the gist of what we have discussed. You are on the inaugural edition of the Gist. Thank you both for your time and your thoughts. Always a pleasure to listen to Atul, Aneja, and Prem Mahadevan. Welcome to our channel. We hope to connect with you when time permits and when we have the appropriate subject to discuss. But until the next time, do keep watching. We are going to do this from Monday through Wednesday every week at 7 p.m. Indian Standard Time. Keep watching us, keep subscribing to our YouTube channel, and of course, keep coming back with your feedback and comments. Of course, like Prem said, they will try and give impression. I can see Pakistani trolls on our comment section talking about that you will never be able to take back POK, Gilgit Baltistan. All that is happening. I think they are in large numbers out on this our comment section in this program itself. So that game has already begun. But thank you very much, both of you, for joining me in this inaugural edition of The Gist. You're on StratNews Global.
Always a pleasure, Nitin. Thank you.